Good afternoon. I'm Tom Beard, Vice President for Development here at the University of Michigan, and I am so pleased that you're able to join us today. With so many challenges this year, one silver lining has been the opportunity to gather people from around the world virtually all at the same time. While I can't wait until we're able to gather in person, I've really enjoyed connecting virtually over this past year with our Michigan family with so many events along the way, and I hope that you've been able to join us for some of those. We're likely to continue this beyond the pandemic in addition to in-person gatherings and visits. And today, I look forward to this conversation with University of Michigan President Mark Schlissel and Tracy Wolfson. I know that they're prepared to address a wide range of issues today. Among many things, we'll hear what it's like to lead America's #1 public university through this global pandemic, while continuing to fulfill our public mission of education, research, and patient care. I know it hasn't been easy, but there's been many lessons that we've learned along the way. Thanks to Mark Schlissel's steady leadership, as well as generous support from people like you through the years, our university will emerge from this crisis in a position of strength. So thank you so much. Hosting our discussion today is Tracy Wolfson, a 4-time Emmy-nominated broadcaster for CBS Sports. Tracy is CBS's lead reporter for the NFL and for NCAA men's basketball. Among her many roles, Tracy hosts the all-female sports show We Need to Talk on CBS Sports. And most importantly, Tracy is a proud graduate of U of M's College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. Welcome, Tracy Wolfson and President Schlissel.
Thanks, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're off to a great start, President Schlissel. We have solicited questions in advance from the audience, and I've used those to guide the conversation today. We have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Are you ready?
Sure, of course.
Great. Well, we know this past year has obviously been extremely challenging for everyone, and I can only imagine how hard it has been for the students. Can you give us an update first off on what the university is doing to ensure their safety, but also trying to get them back to some sense of normalcy?
Sure, thanks. And thanks very much, Tracy, for being willing to make some time for us and to host the conversation. I'm a big fan of yours, and thanks to all of the alumni and parents and friends and donors of the university that have joined this series of conversations. I think it's fantastic that we can continue to engage with so many people in these challenging times. And you're 100% right. This has been the hardest year, certainly, of my leadership life. And I'd argue that life is upside down in America and all around the world. There are things that have gone well on campus and things that have not gone as well on campus. Every decision we have to make is between alternatives, neither of which are preferable. It's just been a really challenging year. Through the year, though, our goal is really has been to maintain the health and safety of people under the threat of a global pandemic, while at the same time delivering as much of our mission as possible, the research, the teaching, the patient care, the service we provide to the society. And when it comes to health and safety, of course, our students are out front in that responsibility, but I'm also responsible for tens of thousands of faculty and staff. And we live here in this lovely town of Ann Arbor. We've got lots of friends and neighbors here. So it's really preserving the health of the entire community, but particularly our students. It's challenging to make a transition to online learning as we did almost exactly a year ago, a few weeks, it'll be a year. We've gotten better at it. It's not ideal. It has reconfirmed my idea that online education won't replace in-person education. There are many things that you just sort of can't do remotely. Nobody wished to have one of their years of college be in the midst of a pandemic, so it's unwelcome for everybody. But by and large, our students have been incredibly adaptable. We're proud of the fact that our enrollment's maintained a high level. Students are progressing towards their degrees. We were able to provide extra financial aid to students whose families were economically affected by the pandemic. So we've kept people in school. We've had too many students develop COVID-19 in the fall. We had about 2,600 students. And so far this semester, over 1,500 students. The vast majority of our students are following all of the safety guidelines and they're doing great. The campus itself, our classes that are in person are safe. We don't have transmission in class. People are complying with our guidelines around masking and hand washing and distancing. Our faculty and staff are doing well. They're remaining safe. But again, too many of our students have developed COVID-19. The only silver lining there is we've only had 2 hospitalizations amongst all these students. So, thank goodness, although some cases are more severe than others, there hasn't been loss of life and minimal hospitalization. But I wish we had fewer cases. We're trying to provide as normal an experience as the pandemic will allow. We only have a small fraction of our classes in person, and I know that students, but also our faculty and staff, we're all social creatures, and I'd much rather be sitting in front of an audience on a stage with you, Tracy, than dealing with thousands of people remotely. So we all miss that. Our student life folks have tried to keep facilities up and running that provide some social experience for students. So rec sports is operating at lower density. There's intramurals going on at lower density and with precautions. Hundreds of student groups are still doing their student activities. Yesterday, I met with a number of students from Dance Marathon, an annual fundraising event for our children's hospital, but they're largely online, and the students are adapting to online living. In the fall, we probably had more people in the residence halls than we should have. We had a lot of disease, and in collaboration with the health department, we decided to have fewer people be residential in the spring. But many of those people ended up deciding to live in town in similarly multi-roommate circumstances. So it was really not as advantageous as we thought it would be, decompressing or de-densifying the campus. I'm more focused now on optimism looking ahead. The first moment where I really started to feel good about things was in December when the 2 vaccines were approved. And this is my own background. I'm a medical doctor and an immunology researcher. It was remarkable that in less than a year, we went from the first description of a disease to 2 highly effective licensed vaccines. It's been slow to roll them out, but things are going to start ramping up significantly. More than 10% of Americans have received their first dose. Similarly, here in our campus community, significant fractions of people are already in the vaccine pipeline. And that gives me great hope that through the summer months and in the fall semester, there'll be much more of the normal student social experience and in-person learning experience that we've all come to identify with the university.
Well, you touched on a lot of things there. I want to go back first and ask you, why has it been so difficult to get in-class learning back on campus?
Well, because our public health experts have argued, and the data supports, that the disease is transmitted by close person-to-person contact. What that caused us to do is to say, look, we can't have classes with 50 or 100 or 200 students sharing the same space, because if there's one infected student there who's a super spreader, now we've got 100 kids who are in quarantine and a handful of them will develop COVID. So we really had to switch to only small classes. And then similarly in our dormitories, roommates and hallmates and people who share bathrooms, they're incredibly cautious, but still this is a very transmissible disease. We have to keep our eye on the fact that 500,000 people in our country have died this year. It's a breathtaking number of people, skewed towards the elderly, but not entirely. We really have to balance the experience we want our children, our students to have with their safety and the safety of the staff and the faculty and the community members that live around them.
From the comments we've received, and we mentioned a lot of families and parents have given us questions to ask you, a lot of the blame seems to be surrounding the faculty and the staff and not wanting to return into the classrooms. Do you see this as the case? And what do you say to those who feel that way?
Yeah, I'd say that faculty and staff are very concerned. Many of them are in age groups or have pre-existing conditions or have jobs when it comes to our staff, like our bus drivers, our maintenance people, our food service people. where they have to be exposed to others. And there, until recently, has not been a vaccine. And although masking works, it's not foolproof. And although students comply, it's not 100.0% of the time. So I think there really was a lot of concern on behalf of our faculty and staff. And because there are alternative modalities to teach where the risk goes down not being in person, and particularly when it comes to large classes and situations where you can't avoid close contact, we erred in the favor of preserving health and safety to help make it to the other side of the pandemic with our community intact. Now the challenge is getting people comfortable with the idea of vaccination leading to a much safer environment and everybody coming back to in-person education. There are some parts of the campus that the nature of how they teach have been more in-person than other parts. So in the sciences where there are teaching laboratories, or in the health sciences where a lot of the instruction is clinical, those folks have been in person throughout, using masking and distancing as best they can. Classes that are lecture classes that can be delivered in just like we're doing now, or even seminar classes that can be delivered through conversation, are being done online, for safety reasons. And as people get vaccinated and the situation's safer, more and more people will come back. And I really do anticipate a fall semester that looks much more like a normal college experience. I also want to point out, Tracy, there's a notion that, Michigan's getting it wrong and other people are getting it right. We're all struggling with how to do this. I meet with my presidential peers all the time. Some schools are more in person than we are. Some schools are less. All schools are seeing very significant numbers of cases, and the common denominator is it's off-campus social life. And not everybody, just a fraction of students, but a fraction of students that's not a trivial fraction. So we're all trying to figure out how to make it through with this right balance between mission, education and research, and health and safety. As an example, our research labs have been back open again since July, and they're operating now at about 75% density. There were literally thousands of students, both graduate students and undergrads, doing research projects in our lab at low density, and it's working fine. Those are in-person educational experiences. Sitting in a classroom for 45 minutes or an hour with the door closed, breathing everyone else's air, you have to be really careful how you do that. So it's all a matter of trying to get the balance right. And no one's ever been through this before. So, and then the last thing I'll say, and it's a leadership phenomena that I'm seeing all around the country. Governors are being recalled or in battles with their legislatures and their publics. CEOs are under criticism, presidents are under criticism. But I think everybody's looking to be held harmless from a global pandemic, and that's really impossible. And what we have to do is trust one another, try to keep one another healthy and safe to make it through to the other side as strong and as forward-looking and as educated and as healthy as we possibly can. That's our shared goal.
How confident do you feel that come fall, and maybe what is that timeline where you'll have a decision to know whether everyone can return to in-person learning or not?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you the way we're approaching it is to prepare for different scenarios. I think the most likely thing from what I've been reading and what I'm hearing from colleagues is within about a month or so, the supply of vaccine will increase very significantly. And I know that our faculty and staff community, as well as all the patients, many of the patients in our healthcare system, are all clamoring for vaccine. So for a number of months, vaccine will still be limiting, but we've ramped up to the point where we can deliver 25,000 vaccinations a week. So if you look at it, we've got 30,000 undergrads and 15,000 graduate and professional students. In 2 weeks, we're done. We vaccinated everybody if we have adequate supply. Similarly, we've already vaccinated all of our healthcare workers, so it's really supply. And I think that's going to ease up in the coming month. And through the spring and summer months, I'm pretty confident we'll get through a significant fraction of the staff and the faculty. And then come the students, and the students will probably be significantly at home over the summer months. And we're going to strongly encourage them to get vaccinated at home if vaccine's available to them. And we'll be set up to vaccinate them here when they come back to campus in the fall if they haven't been vaccinated already. So if that scenario is correct and we really can have almost all of the faculty and staff who want to be vaccinated, and a fraction of the students in an ongoing, increasing way will have a pretty normal looking semester. If that doesn't come to pass, if there's a variant of the virus that develops that's resistant to the vaccine, I can't predict that, but all bets are off if there's a production problem with the vaccine. But I'm starting to become increasingly optimistic about what the fall looks like.
One other thing a lot of parents and students were disappointed in is the decision to hold commencement virtually. Can you explain how you came about this decision?
Yeah, believe me, I share everyone's disappointment. It's one of the few things I do every year where everybody's happy. The parents are happy, the students are happy, the restaurants in town, the hotels in town are happy, everybody's happy. And we tried our best to look for ways that we could accommodate first a normal seeming graduation using the big house. And then we figured we couldn't bring people here from all around the country, all around the world, because travel is one of the big risks of spreading COVID. So then we said, can we do something for students only in the big house? We looked at the big house, and current guidelines, which are still in effect, say you can only have events with up to 100 people. That's not going to work. 100 people is almost trivial for us. So then we looked even smaller and we said, look, what about the schools and colleges? Well, what if we do a school at a time? Like you were mentioning earlier, Tracy, you had your communications department had a graduation. All those things require bringing in staff, faculty, vendors, perhaps students that have been studying from home around the country, and having to make the decision far enough in advance to allow people to plan, and not having a crystal ball to say what things would be like towards the end of April, beginning of May. Some years it's freezing cold. You can't do anything outside on May 1st, and you're sitting shivering in the rain in the big house. So we ended up deciding that the risk benefit just wasn't there. Many schools have decided to give it a try anyway. They may have to change their minds. Some schools, just like us, have said, look, we have to err on the side of safety. If I had a crystal ball that I was 100% confident in, it might have been a different decision. I didn't want to plan a big in-person graduation and disappoint people 1 week out. And then when we were doing this planning, we were having 300 cases a week amongst our students, and we just were in a lockdown. So the community hadn't been able to control the spread of the virus either. So for all those reasons, we erred on the side of safety. But in addition to having a synchronous online event, which will have high production values and really be very nice, and we'll announce a couple of really cool speakers pretty soon and entertainment. We're planning a number of in-person sorts of things for students that don't require they come together in big crowds. We're looking to do something in the big house for students over the course of a period of time. Other things in and around the campus, special outdoor shows that don't cause large numbers of people to come together. So we recognize that people want to share the experience with their friends, and we're going to look for ways to do that on a smaller and safer scale. We're also going to look for ways to invite students back, maybe in the fall, even if things are better and folks are vaccinated. I can imagine a non-football weekend in the fall, inviting back students who can make it back to have a big celebration in the big house of some kind. One of our regions keeps prodding us to have a big concert in the big house, which hasn't happened in a long time. That might be a lot of fun, just as a gift to our graduates. So we're working on lots of alternative ideas so as not to lose the moment. And my heart goes out to everybody who's missing the graduation.
Me too. I want to shift things a little bit. How about on a financial level? How has COVID affected the university there?
Fortunately, going into COVID, we were financially strong, a fantastic donor and alumni support, very good enrollment. So things were good heading in. But they've been challenging, and just like they are for all institutions, businesses and universities. Initially, our health system took an enormous hit in terms of volumes and cash flows. We stopped doing scheduled surgery, we stopped doing routine healthcare visits, and we filled up with COVID patients. We were taking care of over 250 patients at a time. Most of them were critically ill. But during the summer months, that slowed down. We were able to reactivate our hospitals, up and running as normal now, despite significant number of cases. We figured out how to take care of non-COVID and COVID cases, and that has stabilized. Tens of millions of dollars were lost, but that's being made up for. On the campus, the athletic program has lost very significant amounts of money with the big house not having fans this year, and a shrunken TV schedule. As you know, your network, amongst others, doesn't want to pay for product that they're not getting. So, those are losses that we're experiencing. And then on campus, these empty dorm rooms are lost revenue, tens of millions of dollars of lost revenue to the university. Fortunately, our enrollment is good. We've suffered some losses of international students who literally can't get here. So that's cost the university some money. COVID testing is very expensive. We're spending more than $1 million a week on COVID testing. Modifications to the campus to make things a bit safer has been costly. IT enhancements have been costly. So, if I had to estimate, we probably lost on the academic side of the campus approaching $100 million. And we'll make that up from reserves, from some debt that will pay out over the fullness of time. We've had a hiring freeze in effect. We've had a salary freeze in effect. Our employees are making sacrifices to help us make it through.
Yeah, well, when you look towards the future, I mean, the pandemic has changed everything. And in your view, and you touched on a little bit also, how has it changed higher education in general and how it will look like, whether it's at our university or elsewhere?
Yeah. So that's, a question that all of us are thinking about. And, it's such a trite statement, but, the statement is you never let a crisis go to waste. You're always going to learn things and adapting to these unusual circumstances, some of which might prove, to be valuable when circumstances are normal. And I would even point to an event like today. It would be very difficult for us to hold an alumni event with 1,000 people. But here we are, we're doing them once a month and we're doing them remotely. And we've learned that people enjoy that. And we enjoy being able to reach out. Educationally, we've learned, we already knew that there are some things that you can do online that you can do just about as well as in person. There are many things you can't. So this has reinforced my belief that the value added of a Michigan education is an in-person value added. It's the students interacting with one another in class, but also in dorms and eateries, socially, at athletic events and clubs. It's that engagement that can't be replaced online. But we have learned, for example, that if you're a student and you want to do study abroad, but you're hesitating because there's a required course that you really need to take, guess what? You can take it remotely, and then you can take your semester in France, or you can take your semester in the Middle East or in Asia. So we've untethered students from the campus a bit in the future in ways that I think are going to be helpful. Two other things I'll mention. One is all of us remember, especially intro courses that were really large courses. So the last big course I taught was when I was a professor of biology at Berkeley, had 650 students taking intro biology, 8 o'clock in the morning, Wednesday and Friday, sitting shoulder to shoulder, trying to drink their coffee and stay awake at 8 in the morning. We don't have to have 650 person lectures. We can do online lectures to transfer that kind of content and then make up the in-person time with small group sessions, problem sessions, more engaged and experiential learning that would really enhance the more didactic things that we'd be able to do online. So we've learned that. And the last thing I'll mention, and something we were experimenting with before the pandemic, I think a change in our society and the nature of business, mostly because of technology and things like artificial intelligence, has been happening faster and faster. And I think our graduates are going to have to continue to be educated and re-educated throughout their careers. There are jobs they might want to fill that don't exist right now, that 10 years from now will be important new jobs. And there are things that people do that computers are going to do in a few years, and they're going to need to look for something else to do. I'd love to find a way to use these online modalities to maintain the educational connection between alumni and others and the university as adults in their lives and families and careers throughout the rest of their lives. And we're already piloting things like that in the business school and elsewhere, where once you've gotten your education here, you're a student at Michigan forever.
It's amazing how many silver linings, we call it, have come out of this pandemic. On a personal level for you, what have you learned through all of this that can change how you lead this university going forward? And is there anything that you wish you could do over?
Yep. So yeah, I think my learning is going to continue for a long time as I continue to think about what went well, what went less well, and what we could have done differently. One of the things I've learned for sure, and you would have been able to tell me this as we just chatted, is communications is really critical. And you may think you're communicating, but people receive information differently. And there's almost no such thing as too much communication, especially in a time of uncertainty and fear and anxiety, a novel time like we're living in now. I tend to be a facts and logic person. And I figure if I can show people data and explain things, then I'm done. It's clear what we should be doing. There's a lot more to understanding how people perceive their circumstances and understand what we're asking folks to do than simply presenting facts and logic. So I really, in hindsight, should have been doing much more engagement, and not just with our public health and medical experts, but with our historians and anthropologists and social workers and public policy people and music scholars and students, hearing about their experiences during the pandemic, getting their thoughts about how we can best continue to educate them or to help them do their research while keeping them safe. So much more communication in multiple modalities. Some people read emails, a lot of people throw them away. Some people live on Twitter. Personally, I'm not a big Twitter person, but some people, that's how they get information. Video modes are important for some people. So one of the big lessons is the importance of communicating, the breadth of communication, explaining the reasoning and the uncertainties behind the decisions that we're actually forced to make. That's been a big lesson. And I think a second lesson is don't take anything for granted. The university had been doing absolutely great, and all of a sudden, instead of worrying about the next educational program or the next big research initiative, we're worried about how to continue the university in the setting of a pandemic where people are locked in their rooms. So don't take anything for granted.
Well, you mentioned, trying to engage with, Michigan fans and supporters. And obviously with the pandemic, that's extremely difficult. I know traveling on the road has been really hard for me in my job. So how have you made sure to be accessible during this time and getting out into the broader Michigan community? This obviously is one of those ways, hosting these webinars, but what are some other examples that you've been able to do? And what would you like to do in that area going forward?
Yeah, so, it's been very purposeful, the engagement. I've begun, and I'm 2/3 the way through, visiting each of our schools and colleges, inviting anyone that wants to come to sit and have a conversation like this with questions and back and forth, largely faculty and staff, and these kind of events in the schools and colleges. There are equivalent groups of staff that have regular meetings and organizations. I've been meeting and joining those kind of meetings, again, all online. I hold office hours every month. Students can sign up and talk to me. I conduct what we call fireside chats with students, where Student Life picks out 30 or 40 students from all different parts of the campus, and we have a conversation. Used to be in person, now we're doing it by Zoom. I used to have student leaders over to the house each month for pizza. Well, I don't give them pizza, but we meet like this, from where they are and where I am. So a lot of this kind of engagement. I've also gone and visited the dormitories and stood in line with the students who are picking up their meals, just trying to talk to them, hear about their experience, tell them what's going on. Alumni events of this type, parent events. I did a parents council event a few days ago. So many things of that type. But what I'm hopeful is after I'm vaccinated, I'm not vaccinated yet, I'll be able to start doing more things in person at low density with other people who are either vaccinated or comfortable, and starting to get out there more to help sort of lead the community back out from undercover. I look forward to doing that in the months ahead.
Well, you mentioned the students. So if you could go back and tell students from prior years how best to prepare for a world-changing event like we've experienced, you have the background as a doctor, you have the background as a university leader, what would you tell them?
It's interesting because I think they face the same challenge that many of us face, is the challenge of perspective. The COVID pandemic, has almost lasted a year, and it's been very disruptive. It's likely to continue to be disruptive for at least another 6 months, perhaps another year. So let's say 2 years. It's a small fraction of their lives. It's a bad timing, but there's no such thing as good timing for a total disruption. It's bad timing for you. You've got kids at home trying to learn online, and you've got a career to pursue. So there's no such thing as good timing for a crisis. But what I'd urge them to do is approach things with a bit of perspective, and to try to say, this is bad, but it's only a small fraction of what otherwise will be a long and interesting and exciting life. And then, the next thing I'd say is try to make lemonade out of lemons. Look for things that you can do under these circumstances that you might not, normally do. Again, either things online or things that you can do on your own. Books that you've always wanted to read. It doesn't sound exciting, but I haven't read a book for fun since I can remember. I wish I could do that kind of thing. So to try to help folks put things in a longer term perspective. Previous generations, Tracy, have gone through wars, right? Think of what it was like in our parents' or my parents' generation living through the Second World War or the Great Depression, where people were literally out of work for a decade and there were food lines. So, basically once every so many years, we have a crisis, and then this is ours. It'll end and we'll be stronger after it's over.
But you mentioned that the mental health side of this pandemic is real, and it's real for students of this age. How has the university helped them in regard to that over these last 12 months?
Yeah, that's been challenging for all people, but particularly students. I think there have been recent studies and reports that have really even quantified that. Our student life folks have tried to find ways to engage with all of our students, whether they're in the dorms, living in town, or living at home, again, through online modalities. We continue to make growing investments in our counseling services, CAPS, the psychological services. We have online appointments through CAPS. We've hired significantly more counselors. We're organizing group ways, not so much to treat psychological problems, but to promote wellness, to talk about ways, tricks of the trade, to have people help de-stress their lives and try to maintain a more positive balance in their life. We've tried to promote exercise as a mechanism of trying to promote some psychological balance in life. So, multiple modalities. One of the problems we've run into is with our psychological services, the way licensing works is if a student is studying at home outside the state of Michigan, we're actually not allowed to have a therapeutic relationship with them. It's against licensing laws. What we're allowed to do is continue to treat somebody who started getting help here in Michigan and then left, but you can only do that for so much. So we're trying to, along with others, lobby to get those laws changed so we can provide more remote mental health care. We've tried to de-stress the students' experience. One of the complaints that I've gotten from students is, although they've gotten used to online education, the courses seem to be more demanding, more tests, more quizzes, just more workload. And we think that's coming from professors that are nervous that the kids aren't working hard enough and not paying attention. So we're working with our faculty to tell them, no, the students are working really hard and they are paying attention, ease up a little bit. And we're doing things like this week, we introduced a wellness day where we just gave everybody off on Wednesday. And there'll be another one in a couple of weeks, just to help people be able to take a step back, a mental break. And then finally, we've changed our grading and final exams. So we now allow students during the pandemic to decide after they've taken their final, whether they want their course to be pass, no credit, or for a grade. Just to kind of de-emphasize the stress level that comes from, how am I going to do on these online courses? Will I get the A that I need to go to medical school? We're trying to de-stress the environment. So multiple types of things.
Well, a lot of people on this webinar right now, while they have kids at the university, they may also have kids that are looking to attend the university and going through that whole admissions process. How has that changed through the pandemic?
Yeah, well, more of it has been remote. Routinely, what we would used to do is travel to different parts of the country and have local or regional fairs where people would come and talk to folks from the admissions office and from student life. And that's had to go virtual. Our tours are pretty good production value, but they're online tours. They're not real live campus tours. That fun ritual of taking your kids to visit college campuses. My wife and I did that 4 times. It was great fun. That's another victim of the pandemic. So we've replaced that with online modalities. But remarkably, this year for undergrads, our application numbers are up over 25%. We had more applications this year than at any time in the history of the university. Approaching 80,000 applications, where the year before we had 63,000 applications. The quality of the students every year is just better and better. When I talk to alumni and tell them the stories and the averages, they say, oh my gosh, it's good that I went to school in the 1980s because I never get in now. So it's exciting that students and their families still look to Michigan. They project, a more normal experience in the years ahead, and we've got lots of great applicants in the pipeline.
How about Michigan alumni like myself and those on today? What can we do to help the university and students as we emerge from a pandemic?
Yeah, alumni all around the country are actually the reason why the university is so successful. So we've got over 600,000 alumni, and on average, the success level of a Michigan alum is tremendous. And the social connectivity of Michigan alums is fantastic. And it's hard for me to think of being in a city and not noticing somebody with some maize and blue on, or as I became more prominent as a member of the university community, I'd be walking in New York or in Boston or in Washington or in LA or San Francisco or Chicago, and somebody would turn around and say, go blue randomly. So it's that network of folks that always have Michigan on their minds. And what they do is they talk about that. So even if I look behind you, Tracy, you have access to all different kinds of sports figures around the world because of your job. And what do you have? You have a Michigan basketball jersey and a Michigan football on your shelf. That social connectivity and the way you talk about your Michigan experience to your professional colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, the kids you might be mentoring, or your own extended family, that's what you can do for Michigan. You can continue to tell them about the experience you had and how it served you for your lifetime. And if they say, my goodness, look how different it is during the pandemic, you'll say, it surely is. People are trying to make it through to the other side. Everyone's trying to maintain the highest quality education possible and keep everybody healthy and alive. And then we'll get back to normal and have that same experience you did. So that's what alums can do, is they can look to their experiences, look to the value, lifelong value of being a Michigan alum, and help everybody understand that so they can contextualize what really is a moment in time that's more challenging than we'd like it to be.
Well, I'm just telling you, I didn't just put those things up there just for today. They're always there, always representing Michigan. Well, before we start running out of time, why don't you tell us what you're most excited about at Michigan that is not COVID related?
Sure. So I thought about that a little bit because we talked about that a day or two ago, and I'll mention things in a few different categories. One is, one of the great virtues of this university is its academic breadth, that we can really pull people together to take on the biggest challenges out there in society. And about a year and a half ago, I set up a commission to advise us how to become carbon neutral. So it's called the President's Commission on Carbon Neutrality. It has faculty members, staff members, outside experts, students, and they've been working incredibly diligently. We gave them a budget, they hired consultants, they had focus groups. So they're within a couple of weeks of presenting their report. And they're going to come up with a timeline and a list of prioritized activities to take this massive public university, including all 3 campuses in the health system, and get us to carbon neutrality in a specified length of time. That's incredibly exciting. And that's coming out and is going to be a big focus of our activity moving forward. I mentioned I'm excited about the very large number of enthusiastic and outstanding applicants to the university. I was nervous because of how much different the college experience has been, and other schools have suffered enrollment challenges. I'm very excited about the talented students. Our faculty this year won a bushel of awards. We've got 10 new members of different national academies, and 3 American Academy of Arts and Sciences Fellows, and 4 new Sloan Foundation Fellows, and Carnegie Award winners, and Guggenheim Fellows. It's absolutely an amazing faculty that continues to get awards, and that's very exciting. We've launched new initiatives this year, and they've had to gone to a sort of slow launch because of various reasons, but we started a firearm injury preventions initiative. It turns out that we have the largest number of faculty and the most research dollars of any university studying firearm injury. And we're approaching it just like the automobile industry approached how do you make cars safer. We're going to avoid arguments around the Second Amendment and study firearm injury like a public health problem. So I want to talk more about that in the future, but I'm very excited. We've started an arts initiative where we're engaging the arts and teaching creativity across the campus and using the power of the arts to convene people, to convene difficult conversations that we have to have as a society. And I guess the last thing I'll mention I'm really excited about is I'm a huge basketball fan. Man, we're doing absolutely fantastic. The downside is I can't sit there in my really fantastic seats right behind the broadcast team, right behind Rafferty. I usually sit and watch the team, but I'm going to watch them tonight. They're on at 7 o'clock in a big game against Iowa. Juwan Howard turned out to be not just a spectacular former athlete, alum, professional, and a great human being. He's a great basketball coach. So the team is really outperforming, having been unranked, and now they're ranked third in the country. It's just remarkable. They survived a 2 or 3 week layoff because of COVID, and they won 3 in a row since the layoff against all really strong teams. So I'm really excited about basketball. Women's team too. The women's team is ranked 11th in the country. They're doing great too.
Actually, you mentioned the layoff. What went into that decision?
Yeah, so what happened is when we all came back from the Christmas holiday, people traveled home, and it's very difficult to tell a student for a month-long winter break they can't go home and see their family. And a couple of students brought back to the campus not just COVID, but this variant that originated in Britain, we think, the B119 variant, that's more easily transmissible. So our docs actually discovered this really, in a way that if you could have written a textbook, how to make sure you caught this early and stopped it, our docs jumped on it. 5 of our athletic teams ended up having a total of about 25 cases of this more transmissible version of the virus. At the same time, all around the campus, we were having way too many cases of the regular version of COVID. And the public health folks were getting nervous that the number of cases was exceeding our ability to investigate the cases and then quarantine people to get our arms around it. So the state, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, collaborating with the Washtenaw County Health Department and working closely with our docs, agreed that we really had to have a stay-at-home order for a couple of weeks. Since the problem was involving a couple of clusters in athletics, those 5 teams were put on a pretty strict lockdown. The rest of the athletic program was treated like the rest of campus. So you could leave your room to go to class or to get food, but not to socialize, not for extracurricular activities. And as a result, we shut down athletics for 2 weeks to diminish spread, protect the student athletes, prevent them from traveling elsewhere, bringing disease elsewhere, and things really calmed down. The students were incredibly compliant on these athletic teams. We haven't had any cases in basketball at all, and most of our teams haven't had cases recently. The variant is no longer spreading amongst our students, which is amazing considering how transmissible it is. And we gradually ramped the students back up, gave them a week of practice and conditioning so they wouldn't be forced to compete 2 days after a 2-week layoff. And now they're back doing great.
Well, no pun intended, they have rebounded well.
So to speak.
And you spoke about your passion for basketball. I know you made a trip to the Final Four in 2018. What else is on your wish list for athletics?
Well, I've got a few things. One is a football thing. I've never gotten to experience a Rose Bowl. I don't know if you did when you were a student, or I don't know if you've worked a Rose Bowl, but everyone says it's just a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So I'm really excited and hopeful that Coach Harbaugh can take his team to the Rose Bowl and I get to tag along and really have a Rose Bowl experience. The other thing I'd really like to do is a little bit in your profession. I'd love to sit in and do some color commentary on a basketball game, for 5 minutes or something. I think it'd be great fun sitting next to, Mike Tirico or some really experienced play-by-play person and provide a little bit of presidential color to a basketball game. And then, finally, if there's ever a, former president that wants to come to town and visit and play some pickup in my driveway, I've got a basketball hoop out there and I'm ready, and I could probably get a few people together.
I wonder who you're talking about. And I will definitely talk to my bosses maybe about that play-by-play thing. Probably not going to happen this year during the pandemic, but you never know. And then in terms of football, I actually did attend a Rose Bowl, never had the chance to work it though. You mentioned the re-signing of Harbaugh and the re-signing of Athletic Director Ward Manuel, who re-signed Jim Harbaugh. How much were you involved in that decision and what went into it?
Well, indirectly with coach, because, the AD supervises the football coach. And I don't pretend to have, Ward Manuel's expert level perspective on what makes a good coach and what the alternatives are, et cetera. But Ward did a thorough review of how the football program had done under Jim, not just on the field, but also in the classroom and also on how they comport themselves as members of the student body. And made a thoughtful decision that he wanted to renew coach under a certain set of contractual terms. He presented that to me, made the case, convinced me. I gave the board a heads up, just so they were aware, since it's such a high profile hiring and it's a lot of money. And then Ward went ahead and signed Jim, and my name's on his contract too, because it's a big contract. When it came to Ward, we did a similar thing. This is the end of the 5th year of Ward being here as athletic director. I think he's the best AD in the country. If you just look at how our athletic program overall has done, the number of high-performing teams and individuals, the competitiveness of every one of our teams, the behavior of our student athletes, the number of academic all Big Ten performers, academic All-Americans, the graduation success rate, it's actually as good as it's ever been at the university. I shouldn't even say these things because then something bad will happen. But it's as good as it's ever been. So I've got a huge amount of respect. And, Ward, hires really good coaches. He picked Jawan out, and many professional teams and college teams passed over Jawan. They thought he wasn't experienced enough, or I don't know what goes into that kind of decision. But Ward saw the right things in him. And, I watched the way Jawan works with these student athletes. He's not just a coach, he's a mentor and a teacher, and he's going to shape their experiences for their whole lives. And the way he comports himself on television and in the public eye, I couldn't be prouder of a representative of the university. So that was Ward finding the right person for the time.
Well, as we wrap up here, one final word from you in terms of where you hope, and we touched on it throughout this, but, come fall, come the time that, everyone gets back on campus and hopefully, the students and the faculty can have the vaccine. Where do you want to be when they step foot on campus in terms of just kind of getting back to that sense of normalcy? What would be ideal for you?
Well, ideal for me would be students getting back to campus with a significant fraction of them vaccinated and enough vaccine to go ahead and vaccinate everybody else who wishes to be vaccinated. And then a low enough level of disease that we can gradually unmask and redensify. Things won't get back to normal right away. But I would hope that by gradually across the semester, we can have a much more in-person semester at the start with some public health interventions in place. And then through the course of the semester, get more and more back to what the university would have looked like earlier. And that's my hope, but we're going to have to maintain flexibility. There'll be new data coming out. We don't even know yet whether the vaccine prevents transmission of the disease. We're pretty confident it'll prevent people from getting sick, but we don't know whether it prevents them from getting infected in a way that can transmit the virus to somebody else. So we'll know that in a couple of months. So we're learning things all the time and things will evolve, but I'd like to pull back and get back to as normal an environment as possible through the course of the fall semester.
Hopefully we can get those fans back in the stands for a Michigan game kicking off in September, correct?
Yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. And I could imagine what might happen is getting back at lower density and then building things up as safety allows.
Do you have any final words before we wrap up?
Well, I think my final word, other than to thank you again, Tracy, is to thank all the folks that have tuned on, not just for coming today, but for staying engaged with the university. It's a very difficult and challenging era. I'm sure many of your families have been struck by illness, some of your families by economic challenges. I know that many parents are disappointed on their kids' behalves about the nature of the experience. I just want to thank you all for hanging with us. Wish you all good health, and that this ends up in the rear view mirror, and that our current students and our future students get to have as strong a positive experience and lifelong value out of the university that most of you on today's call got to experience as well.
Well, thank you so much, President Schlissel, for the time. And thank you to everyone who joined today and who submitted all those questions. Tom, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you, Tracy and Mark, for that great conversation today. I know that I learned a lot. We really appreciate your time today and your candor. After a long and challenging year, I'm really grateful for these moments that we have to gather and reflect. I really enjoyed myself today. I hope that you have as well. Your support has made it possible for our students at our university to fundamentally pull through this challenging time with confidence, and I just can't thank you enough for that. We've learned a lot to help us become stronger and more innovative in the years to come, and I'm really looking forward so much to the exciting future that we have ahead of us. So before we sign off today, I want to share with you a very inspirational piece from a virtual concert presented by the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. It's titled A Grand Night for Singing. In this piece, vocal artist Melanie Demore leads the student choir, daring us to lead with love. Now, I think you're going to catch yourself humming this tune after you hear it. I certainly did the first time I heard it several weeks ago. So with that, thank you for joining us today. Enjoy and go blue.
Until next time, enjoy.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. So we gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Don't you despair. Look up ahead. Look up ahead. The path is there. The path is there. So you gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared. I know you're scared. And I'm scared too. And I'm scared too. But here I am. Right next to you. Right next to you. So you gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead